Welcome to Fuse, the global podcast for the PRCA, where we explore the evolving landscape for global communications. We bring together leaders from public relations, politics, marketing, academia, and media to spark new ideas and ignite innovation. I would like to welcome Nirmalya. Welcome to our podcast.
My pleasure.
I am incredibly thrilled to have Nirmalya. Nirmalya I've known for many years, and I've always been in absolute awe of him. He is a polymath. Not only is he a huge figure in marketing and strategy, which I'll delve into, but he also is also an art connoisseur, has won awards for his collection of arts, Germany Roy, and also a wine connoisseur. And he is somebody who has managed to achieve excellence not in just one field, but multiple fields. In addition to wine and art, also academia, as well as the corporate world. Professor Nirmalya Kumar is the Professor of Marketing at Singapore Management University. Previously was a professor of marketing at London Business School, and also taught at Columbia University, Harvard Business School, and many others. He has an impressive corporate career and spanning strategic roles at Tata. He was the head of strategy of the Tata Group, and we're going to hear much more about that later. And he is a much sought after strategic consultant. He's a board member of multiple huge multinationals. He's a prolific author, just doesn't stop producing books. 9 at the moment, at my last count, including one of my favorites, which is Brand Breakout, which talks about emerging market brands. His research alone has earned over 27,000 Google Scholar citations, recognized as a top global business school professor, and he's a patron of the arts, and he's earned an honorary fellowship for his contributions to South Asian art at SOAS, and he's earned countless awards, which it's going to be too long to mention. So welcome, Nirmalya, again. Now, what I wanted to start from is I want to go dial back right to the beginning, and I wanted to know a little bit about your childhood in Calcutta. Now, I've never been to Calcutta, but ever since I can remember, I've heard about Calcutta, this much storied place of where the intelligentsia, the education system, and my father used to talk about Calcutta as being this great seat of learning in South Asia. So I'd love to know a bit more about growing up in Calcutta, how Calcutta sort of formed you, and also how you moved from Calcutta to the US.
Thank you, Farzana. It's my pleasure to be here with you and all the listeners of your podcast. Calcutta clearly in the 1900 was considered to be the second city of the British Empire after London. It was a very powerful place. It was the head of the British in India, and it had, because of at that time, several people, a very high cultural persona to the city, including most famously because of Rabindranath Tagore, who was the first non-white and non-European to win the Nobel Prize. The problem happened that by the time 1970s and 80s came along, when I was growing up in Calcutta as a teenager, it wasn't really the same place. Yes, it still had that intelligentsia. It still had people who would love to debate and fight for ideas, but it also had gone into an economic decline, primarily because so enamored by theory, the politicians and the people ruling Calcutta had gotten very much into the communist mindset, and as a result of which all the business fled Calcutta in the 1960s and 70s and moved on to Delhi and to Bombay, and it left Calcutta a shadow of itself in terms of economic activity, which it still suffers from being the second city in the empire. It has now not even in the top 5 economic activity hubs in India. You see, so it has moved backwards. The problem of growing as a teenager in India, in any case in India in 70s and 80s, early 80s, late 70s, was that young people at that time didn't feel that they had options that were commensurate with the talent that they had. And as a result of which, there was a huge migration that took place from India. So in the 50s and 60s, the migration from India was to the UK. But in the 70s and 80s, the migration from India was to the US. And these were generally people who had topped their classes, could not find adequately paying jobs in India, and the US was a country that was allowing them scholarships to come and study there, after which they were quite liberal in giving them a visa to stay on if the company hired you. And so I was part of that exodus that took place. And all the famous people that you read about today from India who are heading Microsoft or Google or whatever it is, Adobe, they all are part of that same generation of exodus that took place, you know. And so it was really a very, and I landed in Chicago, knowing never having been overseas in my life, because my parents came from a very middle class family. We grew up in a home with no running water, forget television or telephone,
Wow.
right? So I had a $400 and a one-way ticket. I told my dad I need a one-way ticket to Chicago. He told me I don't have money for the one-way ticket. I said, Dad, figure it out. So he borrowed from a friend the money to buy me a one-way ticket, and he took $400 from his own resources and gave them both to me and said, "You go now, make a life for yourself." And when I landed in Chicago, I went to the University of Illinois Chicago, which wasn't a very famous or a very prestigious school then. And I asked for admission, and I didn't have any money. They didn't look at my grades. They said, "We don't understand India grades," but they told me, "You can come sit in the classes and see what happens." And after the first midterm exam that took place, I was informed that I have a scholarship for the rest of my studies.
Wow.
So, so that was just, the magnanimity of America and the openness that they had to talent at that time. And I didn't even have money for a room. And fortunately for me, I saw a little postcard on the notice board in the university saying free room. I call up the person, "What's this free room about?" She says, "I have a teenage daughter of 12 years old. If you are willing to stay at home every evening, when I go out, you can have a room for free." I said, "This is a fantastic deal because I don't have any money to go out. And in any case, I need to study at right." So that's how I was my India to US. And then, of course, when I was in school, I got the opportunity to work for companies. Then from University of Illinois, I went to University of Northwestern University Kellogg School to do my PhD.
Incredible. I mean, that's one hell of a return on that $400 ticket.
By the way, I also returned the money for the ticket because my father couldn't afford to pay him back, so I had to pay him back many years later.
So obviously, the world is your oyster. You're clearly got incredible sort of levels of intelligence and IQ, and a voracious reader. Why, of all the disciplines in the world, why did you choose marketing? As somebody brought up in the sort of South Asian, British culture, marketing wasn't even a thing. It was really accountant, lawyer, doctor, dentist, engineer. Where did the marketing come from? And because I didn't even know it was an option. I mean, I stumbled into PR and started my career at 30 because I don't think I was allowed to go into PR. How did you decide marketing?
So basically, it was, kind of serendipitous to some extent, because what happened was that when I was growing up in India, because we didn't have a television and telephone, the only way you could, occupy your mind for a person who was like myself, very curious, very learning oriented, was to read, right? Unfortunately, at that time, my father and mother made me a member of a library which was next door to the house. But the library had a restriction that you could only borrow 2 books in a day. And that was entirely insufficient for a guy like me.
My
Because
God.
I used to go when the library opened, I would borrow the 2 books. By 10:30, 11 in the afternoon morning, I had already finished the 2 books and I was waiting around to do something. Fortunately for me, my father was doing his MBA, executive MBA, when I was about 14 years old. And the book that he had for marketing was Philip Kotler's second edition, Marketing Management. And of course, because I have nothing more to read, I was reading everything. I read the whole book too. And that's how I got excited about marketing. But to your point, because there was no option of doing marketing, I did accounting. I did an undergrad and a master's in accounting.
Mm.
And I thought I would do a PhD in accounting when I went there to America. But then over there, more options opened. And I found accounting and finance, which is what I did my MBA in, accounting and finance, very boring in the end. It was like Tina Turner said. They asked her, "Why did you go into rock and roll instead of R&B?" She said it was just too boring to be an artist. And so it was, for me, it was the same thing. And then I was very fortunate to have Philip Kotler himself be the admissions director for the PhD program at Kellogg. So I walked into his office. He called me to his office. I walked into his office for the interview. He said, "I have 80 applications. I need to accept 5 students. Tell me, why should I accept you?" I gave him some really cockamamie story, which he bought, and you are accepted. because he's eager to probably have any better way to accept anybody. And so he accepted me, which was very fortunate for me. And today, of course, he's a good friend of mine. But at that time, it was a life changing moment for me.
My gosh, and it must have felt so surreal because at one point of your life you were reading his books, and and he's obviously a renowned author and thinker in the field, and then the next minute you're sitting in front of him and wangling your way in successfully. So that's
First
incredible.
class in the PhD program was taught by him on marketing. And for the first assignment, first day, he gave us a paper to read that he had written and said, "Give me a critique on that paper." So I took the paper home. I tore it completely apart and gave that as my report, and I got an A plus. And
Incredible.
again, it showed me the beauty of America. That here was the guy, the most famous person in marketing of all time. Here was this first year PhD student tearing apart a paper, and he said, "Yeah, the guy's right."
Would you consider yourself a contrarian?
This is where my Calcutta training comes in. In Calcutta, because we had nothing to do and occupy our time was occupied in debate. So no matter what position somebody took, just for the fun of it, you took the opposite position to see could you work your way through and defeat the other person based on logic. And so it is instinctive in my personality and my growth and my teenage years that I've been drummed into taking any position and coming out on the other side of it. So, yeah, to be contrarian, as we say in marketing, the most important lesson in marketing is be distinct or be extinct.
I love that. Absolutely love that.
That's
Do
me.
do you think, Nirmalya, it's easier to be a contrarian in the academic world compared to the corporate world, or actually, both worlds lend itself to having that contrarian trait that you have?
It is true to be authentically yourself is much easier in the academic world because we value diversity of opinion. You make your name through proving other people were wrong. And if you're going to prove other people are wrong, no point trying to prove some paper that has been written and cited 10 times is wrong. Always choose the most famous paper and prove that is wrong. And that's how you become famous yourself. And so for me, this was my strategy my entire career in academic career was I always chose the most cited papers and tried to show that they're wrong. And of course, they're not wrong. What you do is you show that under these conditions, this finding does not apply. And that's how I made my name in the academic world.
Fantastic. And you obviously moved. I mean, not only did you, reach the highest levels of academia. I mean, just the impressive roll call of all the institutions that you have taught in makes one dizzy. But what I was interested in is actually because I know a lot of academics, but not all of them managed to successfully transition into the corporate world, number one. And number two, let alone at the top of, one of the biggest companies in the world. And I know obviously marketers and sort of marketing strategists such as yourself find it easier to segue onto boards. For us PRs, we're still an industry that's sort of in catch-up mode, and so there's a lot of listeners out there who are PR people who just want to understand also how to get on boards. But I just want to start with, how did you personally manage the transition from academia to to sitting on these corporate boards? Were you taken seriously? Having a marketing background, did you struggle when you're dealing with the money men to try and sort of maintain your sort of perspective? So I'd just love to know about how you transitioned from academia to corporate, and did you feel accepted?
So it's a very interesting question, and I'm trying to give a short answer to that. But, in a sense, first, let me just say that for marketing people to get on a board of directors is an extremely difficult thing because we don't hire people on the board of directors for expertise. We hire people on the board of directors for their judgment. What got me onto the board of directors was nothing to do with my marketing, to tell you the truth. What got me onto the board of the directors was I transitioned from marketing to strategy in my consulting practice. Why? Because the people I worked as a consultant, as a marketing consultant for, sooner or later they became CEOs of companies. When they became CEOs of companies, they pulled me along into strategic problems, which in any case was my bent because I was an expert on marketing strategy. So for me to go into strategy was relatively straightforward. That was first part of it. But the second part of it, again, people always tell me what accounts for your success. I say, oh, I was fortunate and lucky to have been born in India at the time I did. Because to tell you the truth, any other time in the lifetime, any other time in history, I would not have had that luck. But in the 1990s, multinational companies started looking at India. When they started looking at India, there were hundreds, literally, professors and business schools in the top institutions who were Indian in origin. But none of them had an expertise in India. They had an expertise in American business and global business to some extent because they're mostly based out of America. I was at that time, fortunately, in IMD in Switzerland, where it was a more global customer base and a more global participant base. So I got to consult with mostly companies in Europe, but also I was pulled in by one or two companies in India. And in 1996, I remember making my first trip for business reasons to India as a consultant. And everybody laughed at me, all my Indian faculty friends, because they said, Nirmalya, you're wasting your time. You can come to America, and at that time, you can get $10,000 a day. Or you can go to India, and no Indian corporate, not even top corporate, was willing to pay $500 a day. Okay. So, but I just decided it's the market of the future. And I went every year, five, six times a year from 96 onwards. And I was one of only three business school professors who went to India on a regular basis at that stage. There was Jack Shett, there was the late C.K. Prahlad, and there was myself. And the three of us got all the press. And so when 10 years later, all the press, all the academics from the US wanted to come into India, the press did not give them any attention. They said, no, these guys came when nobody paid attention to India. You guys are coming now because it's the flavor of the month. And as a result of that, I got onto several boards in India. But the bigger boards that I got into first, rather than the Indian big boards, which I got in later, was Holcim. When they acquired, I was a consultant for Holcim globally out of Switzerland. And when they acquired two companies for $1 billion each in India, they said, you are our Holcim rep on that company. We have the CEO of the company, we have the head of Asia, and you are the third person because they were allowed three board positions. And that got me into India in a big way on the bigger boards. Before that, I was on the smaller boards in India. And then after that, of course, I got into many big boards in India too. So I can't say, see, because what people always ask me, how do you get on boards? I want to tell you, there is no application process to be on a board. There is no advertised vacancy. We need people for boards of directors. This is given through personal networks. And so you really have to be in the network to get on the board. It does not happen, through expertise because I can hire a consultant for two, three, $5,000 a day. What I'm hiring you for is judgment. How do you display judgment to me? If you're like me. So if you go to the same bars, you go to the same restaurants, you go to the same clubs, you belong to the same, exclusionary networks, then I know you're part of us and you will demonstrate the kind of judgment I need you to. It's an old boys network.
Yeah. Well, what about old girls? Can we get in as well?
And now they have to include girls, even though they are fighting it, because all countries have a law that a certain percentage of directors have to be female. And I am actually a big believer in that law. Otherwise, you would not get there.
Yeah. So I guess what that means is networking is really core and important, preferably with future CEOs. So when they eventually sort of get to the top, they'll sort of bring in people that they've seen on their journey and who've impressed them with their judgment. What I wanted to ask about is the evolution of marketing. So what was quite interesting is earlier you said that you sort of reframed yourself from marketing to strategy when you were a
Strategy
marketing
and
strategist anyway. So that was a bit of a bridge, really. But that you had to kind of do that in order to sort of be taken more seriously in the corporate world. So would you advise, PRs who are listening who want to also, get on boards to sort of transition from sort of PR to PR strategists to being a strategist? Do we
see,
sort of
yeah.
shed our skin because PRs won't be taken seriously?
See, the thing is that you have to understand that, when I was doing marketing strategy consulting, and I did it for a long time, for at least 10 years in a very big way, the people I was working with were mostly marketing managers. And then when they sometimes had a major event, that the CEO would be present and they would be there with the CEO. The problem for most marketing managers, and I suspect is the same for PR people, is that they don't need to get in front of the CEO. PR people probably get more in front of the CEO because in most companies, PR is really, if I'm going to be mischievous, is a way for the CEO to use the company's money to promote himself or herself. So, in that sense, I mean, but otherwise, there's no reason for a marketing person to be at the board of directors meeting. Very seldom do we ever call a head of marketing to come and present to the board, whereas the head of finance presents all the time, the CEO presents all the time. So you're not even known by the board of directors who you are. And that is a very big problem. You see, so my big change of being in strategy got me to the CEO and interact with the CEO. A. B, my being considered by the Westerners to be an India expert helped me a lot, because when they wanted to go to India, they could hire consultants in India, but they felt, oh, he's at INSEAD, at IMD, at LBS, so he will understand our perspective also while understanding India, and that allowed me to be like a chameleon. When I was with Indians, I could be Indian, and when I was with foreigners, I could be foreign, and so I could be a Westerner. So that helped me a lot. So I think it is a very important thing to remember that the reason the CEO doesn't pay attention to us is not because the CEO doesn't want to pay attention to us. It's because we don't have something to say, which is a problem for the CEO to solve. Because CEOs have hundreds of problems to solve. Most of them are going to be solved by people below them. Only the exceptional ones come to them, those that are strategic, that are cross functional, that are bottom line oriented. And for those problems, they need people who are bottom line oriented, cross functional, and strategic too. And so that was my first book called Marketing as Strategy in 2004, where I said, if marketing people want to be taken seriously by the CEO, then we have to be more strategic, more cross functional, and more bottom line oriented. Unfortunately, marketing people always want to slip into talking about tactical things. The four P's: product, place, price, promotion. It's not things that are going to excite the CEO, because he thinks I already have a marketing manager. It's their job to solve this problem, not my job.
That's a very, very good takeaway for PR and marketing people, is to sort of, obviously we still need to master the tactics, but we need to think strategically and frame the work that we do in a strategic way that's aligned to the corporate goals. So definitely agree. Now, you've been in marketing for it's about 3 decades
Yeah, almost.
almost. I just wanted to know, a little bit about what your thoughts are in terms of how it sort of transformed over this period, and then also, would love to pick your brains in terms of how you see the sort of future trends of marketing, and
Sure.
also what's been interesting, Nirmalya, about your career is that not only have you worked in so many countries, but you've also lived in many countries. So that's given you a really global perspective on, on marketing. So yeah, over to you.
So, what I would say is that there's two aspects of marketing. The first is the strategic aspect of marketing, which is a question of what I call the three V's: valued customer, who to serve; value proposition, what are we going to offer to this customer; and then value network, which is how are we going to deliver that value proposition to the valued customer. That strategic thing has not really changed much in marketing. You still need to think about who are we serving, what are we going to offer them, which is not only relevant to them, distinctive from the competition, and we can credibly do, and get sure that it is perceived by them. Is the perceived part which is mostly left to the marketing people to do. Okay, so the strategic part has not changed, but what has changed dramatically in the 30 years that I've observed marketing is the tactical portion. Earlier, we used to sell through mom and pop stores. Then we started selling through department stores and supermarkets. Then we started selling through deep discounters like Walmarts and Aldi's and Lidl's. And then now we are selling online. Same thing with promotion. We used to do outdoor advertising, then we did radio, then we did television, and now we are doing search and social. And now, of course, what we see in the last 5 years, that the share of Google and Meta combined, or Facebook combined, has been declining for 5 years in a row in terms of advertising dollars. Why? Because the big thing that is now emerging is retail media. Because I can advertise on Facebook, person has to seek the advertising. They're not really looking for advertising then. They have to seek it, they have to click it, and then we may get the customer to go and buy it. On the other hand, if I advertise on the Walmart or the Amazon website, with one click, this delivered next day to their home. They only need to make one click compared to Facebook, where I have to click a lot first on the ad, then from the ad get to the ad place of the home, then make several more clicks, then do the payment thing and everything. You see, so retail media has become the fastest growing path of digital advertising. And that has meant that search and social have gone down a bit. Search has gone down more. Social, the kind of social also has changed dramatically. Social is very young, it's only 10 years old. But what has changed in social is that it's not Facebook anymore. It's the short videos that have become very popular. And the short videos, especially TikTok, has become the most powerful platform for young people. And what the retail media has been very good at doing, companies like Alibaba, is that they've taken the let's call it the TikTokization of advertising and put it on their retail platform. So Alibaba will hold a 1 hour video live stream with, let's say, a K-pop celebrity, and gets a huge audience on. The K-pop celebrity talks about the products they like, and with one click, the customer can click and buy. You see, and that is what is happening. So, because the brands are saying we rather advertise where the conversion from prospect to customer is easier rather than in Facebook and Google, where you can convert from prospect to this thing, but it's a lot harder. So, just like the whole logic of search and Google was, listen, with advertising on television, you don't know who's watching and how you're going to get the sale. Now, with us, you can. Well, we are saying that, it's even easier on retail media. And 2 years ago in America, Amazon became the number one search engine for people who are seeking to buy a product. So when people want to buy a product, they don't go to Google to search, they go to Amazon to search. It's become the default search engine.
It's so true. I mean, I go into Amazon to buy a toothbrush, and then seconds later, I've got all these other items, because they've just popped up, and their algorithms are so precise. I feel they know me better than I know myself.
They don't know you, what they have at the back end. Now this is very important for your listeners, and I'm going to give uh, a very simple explanation of what is a very complex AI driven algorithm. You see, what they have at the back end is a giant correlation matrix. All the products they sell by all the products they sell. When you have bought 10 products, they look at those people who bought these 10 products, what was the next most correlated product they bought, and that's the one they present to you when you come online. You see, it's how simple it is. You see, so all I'm doing, and this process is called collaborative filtering. All the data that I have, I'm basically filtering it in a way so that when Farzana checks in, I know based on what she's bought in the past, the algorithm throws up these are the next 5 products that these people buy. We just show you that on the side or on the top.
Gosh, God, I mean, just so eerie. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about strategy.
Before we get to that, let me just tell you there is, and this will be a good segue to the strategy. There is one big problem
Yeah,
today that we have to address if you want to talk 5 years down the road. And
yeah,
if you want to talk 5 years down the road, the problems of because these gig economy models have become very big, whether it's Uber, Instacart, Amazon, all whatever, right? They've become very big. Deliveroo, Grab, all of them. The problem with these models is they have a problem with respect to 4 aspects. First is privacy, which is coming from the EU is pushing on it very hard, and others are going to push on it. So that's going to be one challenge. Second is people. Again, with people, the problem is that the reason these models work because customers don't want to pay the full value or the cost of the delivery. They work because you take the most vulnerable section of a society and exploit them. So it's based on those who can't get any other jobs, those who are the most vulnerable in any society, and you pay them a very small amount and you give them very high, customer service level agreements, like you have to deliver so much time and you have to be this polite and everything. So what's happening is they are the ones. So rich people have found a new way to exploit poor people. We order the food to be delivered at home, and the poor people have to take traffic hazards, take the negatives that come with it, take the atmosphere, take all of that into deliver to us, and not even get paid peanuts, and not get any health benefits, not get any security of job, not get any minimum wage for this. And that is why Germany has already started a push that gig economy workers have to start being given vacation time, health benefits, and all. The moment they did this, 2, 3 of the gig economy companies already said we are withdrawing from Germany because there is no sustainable model with that, because we don't make money in any case. And if you have to pay people the right wage, we'll never make money. And the second thing that is very negative about this model, the third thing besides the people and the privacy is the planet, and the profitability is also not there. None of these models make money, and that is the planet. And the planet part is that the amount of waste that we are creating with this home delivery, whether it's of food or whether it's of Amazon, is humongous. Secondly, with the Uber kind of models, people are moving away from public transportation to private transportation. It's increasing the congestion on the roads, it's increasing the pollution on the roads. So all of this is right now, these benefits are unique to you. The drawbacks and the costs are distributed in a very opaque manner across millions of people. That's the problem with these models.
But for instance, people, this, a lot of us, we use Deliveroo, and of course, we want the workers to be paid fairly, and regulation will come in to support the protection of the most sort of vulnerable workers in our economy. How will it evolve? Because it's not as if we're going to. I mean, I'm not going to start cooking anytime soon.
Only one way. We will have to get you to pay the full price of delivery. The price that you pay for delivery today doesn't cover 50% of the cost.
And that's the environmental cost as well.
No,
Because
forget the environmental cost. It doesn't cover the delivery cost. And the moment I increase and by the way, it's a bad business model if the restaurant is complaining that you take too much commission, the employee is complaining you don't pay me enough, and customer is complaining that the delivery charges are too high. It has to be a bad business model if everybody is complaining and we are still not making money.
true, true. So, Nirmalya, strategy. I want to first ask the most basic of basic questions. What is strategy? For some, it's this sort of ethereal, sort of word that's bandied around by people who want to look and sound important. How did you stumble across strategy? It obviously completely changed your career trajectory because it got you into these corporate boards of some of the biggest companies in the world. So I want to know how you stumbled across strategy, what strategy is.
So basically, strategy is the most conceptually, intellectually challenging part of running a business. And strategy is in the end about making choices. Choices about what we are going to do and what we are not going to do in the future. And based on those choices, we are going to deploy our limited resources in a particular pattern versus some other pattern, which would be a different strategy, versus randomly or opportunistically. And so, strategy in the end fundamentally is about making choices. And making choices is very hard for people, especially stark choices from which you cannot reverse quickly. Because if you make a choice today and you decide to do X, that means you're letting go of doing Y and Z, which means that you can't come back tomorrow and say, I'm going to try that. So making choices is very hard for people. And reasonable people disagree about these choices in the top management team. And getting and obtaining consensus in the top management team, that conversation that takes place is the most important part of strategy making. It's the conversation that matters more than the document. Why? Two, three reasons. Firstly, in making that conversation is when we are coming up with our strategy and making agreement on what we will do and not do. Trying to get consensus with people who disagree, because initially they'll all disagree, is a very difficult thing if you don't make it easy. The easiest way to get people to agree on a flavor of ice cream that everybody loves is vanilla. But I don't want vanilla as the answer. I want a hard choice. So when I want people to make a hard choice, then you will get a lot of discussion. But through that discussion and disagreement, we get a better understanding of our opportunity, our threats, our strengths, our weaknesses, and we also get an understanding of why we are making these choices. Because in the end, that's one of the most important points of strategy. The strategy that I make, whether it's a 1 year strategy, a 3 year strategy, or a 5 year strategy, is a living document. It's a living document because as new information comes in, we have a path, we will continuously have to change that path. Depending on how fast moving the industry is, we may have to change a little bit or a lot. And if we have had that initial conversation, which has gotten a common understanding in the top management team of our assumptions, of our strengths, our weakness, our opportunities, our strengths, our competitors, our technology, how the regulation is changing, if we have a good common understanding and we have talked deeply enough about it, then when the time comes to make the strategy document into a living document 6 months down the road or 1 year, it will be a much more efficient process.
Brilliant. So I guess they say, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and it's important to get the buy-in of not just the senior management but the entire organization. Normalia, what I wanted to ask about strategy is, it's not really just for corporates. It's also strategy you can apply to your own individual life. Because if I look at the way that you have sort of managed your career, you were very strategic in making an assumption that India was going to be a big market for the future. And you then made choices. Instead of going to Barbados, you went to India multiple times a year because you understood that by going there frequently, you'll be able to be the chameleon that will be Indian enough for the Indians and foreign enough for the foreigners, in order to be that bridge for market access. So you can apply strategy to your own life as well as to the success and the
I think
future
that's a
of the
very
organization.
important point that you've just made, Farzana. When I teach strategy to people, or I'm talking about strategy, they always say, "But Nirmalya, I'm not the CEO. What will I do with strategy?" Right?
Mm.
It's the CEO's job to make the strategy. It's true. I say yes, but what are you doing in your company? They say, "I'm managing three people in this little part of the company." I said, well, fine. You need a strategy for that. How are you
Mm.
going to manage those three people? What choices are you going to make about where you're going to spend your time, where you're going to spend your resources, while within the constraints of the overall company strategy, right? So all of us need a strategy with respect to what we do. All of us, when we chose to go for college or not go for college, or to go for college in subject X versus Y, we made choices, and those choices could have been made randomly, they could have been made opportunistically, they could have been made based on what my best friend is doing, or they could have been made based on a strategic this thing. I knew upfront myself, I'm not a person who likes working with other people and teams. I knew that upfront. So I need to choose a lonely profession. I knew that. So for me, being a professor was the only thing I ever wanted to be, because I knew that is one place where they A, allow mavericks, B, they allow people who are contrarian and they respect and actually value that, and C, they allow you to work alone by yourself. Because anytime there was a group project given to me in the MBA class school when I was in my MBA, I remember telling all the other students, you can be in my group, there's only one condition: you will not do anything. I do everything. Okay. And in return, I guarantee the A. So after the first 6 months, the moment the professor announced a group project, all the students would put up their hand and say, I'm in Nirmalya's group. Because I said, the only thing I don't want is you guys coming in the way. Because when I'm trying to do something, you guys will come in the way. We're going to get a worse grade. Right? That is, because I know I work best alone and I don't like to work in teams and with other people. I find it very inefficient. So that's a strategic choice I made, that I will go into that kind of a profession, right? That was a choice I made. Going to Europe, I went to Europe even though I was starting my career in America, because I loved Europe and I
Mm.
loved going there. And in my heart, in many ways, I'm European, so I loved that. And I went and moved to Switzerland from this thing. And when I went to Switzerland, everybody thought that was the end of my career from America. They said, "Who leaves America and goes to Switzerland?" Right? So but I chose to do that, and then from there, I made the choice, as you said, instead of going I used to go 10 times a year in the beginning to America for consulting, and I moved it all to going to India. Of course, I didn't make the same money, but for me, it was like education and investment in the future. And remember, it could have turned out all wrong.
Yes,
Right?
yes. Well,
Any strategy has associated with it a risk of failure. Otherwise, it's not a strategy, because it's
yeah.
not innovative, it's not experimental, it's not risk taking enough.
And that's why it's important for the strategy to be a living document, because
Yeah.
then you take in information, feedback, any variances, which allows you to pivot.
Yes.
So that you're not, it's not set in stone, and you have this grey rhino heading towards you, and you're just static. Now, you obviously made a bet on India, and you made a bet that India was going to be an important market, a critical market in the future, and you pretty much got it right. So I wanted to ask, what changes have you witnessed over the years in India? You've been traveling, continuously. Are we in the age of India? What's your thoughts on brand India? Should they change the name from India to Bharat? And of course, it's it's a bit like Deutschland and Germany, and I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, over to you. I mean, a lot of people listening are really interested in India because obviously China is, has its own sort of tensions with the West, and so everyone is looking towards India, and we would love for you to share your insight.
So, what has happened to India in the 30 years that, let's say, from 96 to today, almost 30 years that I've been looking at India, that India has changed. Okay, so what was India 30 years ago is not India today. And the biggest thing in India that will strike a person when they go. Firstly, when you get down from the plane in India, it's an assault on all senses. Fine. But the biggest thing you will notice in India is the energy. And that energy comes from the young population. They have a can do attitude. They really believe in the future. They think it's about boundless opportunities. And so you get that energy, and that energy is a high for me. Okay. I don't know and it's a high for many other people who go there. Now, India has been a must win market since, I would say, 1995 for the companies that came a bit late to the party, maybe from 2005. But from then, the 20 years, India has been a must win market. What has changed? I would say in the last 18 to 24 months is very subtle. It's not that India was not a must win market and has become one. What has changed in the last 18 to 24 months is this war that has started by Putin in Ukraine. And you would think, what does the war in Ukraine and Putin have to do with India? Well, what it has to do with India is that because China has become more aligned, seemingly aligned with Russia. And people and China, the growth story in China has ended because last year or the year before, China became the country of declining demographics. So once has become the country of dying demographics, the future of China becomes like the future of Japan, like the future of Italy. You see, because both Japan, Italy, and China, they share something very much in common. What is it? And Russia. What do they share in common? They share in common the fact that the women have been educated dramatically, and the traditional sex roles have not changed. Once women get educated, they have options to work outside their home. Once that happens, combined with the fact that the traditional sex roles don't change, means that the women realize that not only do we have options to work, but the man is not going to help us with the child rearing. If that's the case, their propensity and inclination to have children declines dramatically. And so you can imagine why the lowest birth countries in the world become China, Japan, South Korea, Russia, Italy, and Eastern Europe. You see, and the same thing is happening in southern India. Slowly, slower, but it's happening. And so this is where the big challenge is. So the rise of India in the last 18 to 24 months is because of the flattening of growth in China.
Mhm.
And people are recognizing not only is there a flattening of growth, the second point is that with President Xi, people feel it has become an uninvestable market because your returns in that market are determined by the whims of one person, President Xi, and what he does. And it's the same thing and we have seen the impact of that in Russia over the last 2 years. That one person, when they control what happens in a market,
Mm.
you are at the mercy of their whims.
Mm.
It's not a way, it's not a platform on which to build a great business model. So, but unfortunately for us multinational companies, China is a very big market and will continue to be very. So we will not ignore it, but
Mhm.
we have to start thinking: what if something like Russia happens to China in the next 5 years, and we are told by our political bosses, you need to withdraw from China? Where is it that we are going to get the growth? So it becomes that India comes first, then there's Indonesia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Vietnam, Myanmar, Cambodia. So Southeast Asia for the next 10 to 20 years. After the 20-year cycle is over, the companies that think even further ahead, and by the way, there are companies that think that far ahead, the next big thing after the 20 years is going to be Africa. And everybody knows that because Africa has the youngest population in the world, the fastest growing population in the world. By 2050, many of the most populated cities in the world, which were Asian, are going to become African.
Incredible.
So we are now getting ready for that in
Mhm.
multinational companies, not the usual multinational company, but the top multinationals, whether you're a Unilever, a Procter and Gamble, a Walmart, a Coca-Cola, a PepsiCo, right?
Yeah.
In these companies, especially the consumer market driven consumer companies, we understand this and we are preparing for this transitions.
I mean, that's absolutely fascinating. So it's really a demographic dividend when these countries have a young population, that sort of energy. And I've been going to India for the last 10 years, and I agree with you. When I'm there, you just feel that palpable energy, that optimism, and that sort of can-do attitude. It's infectious. Now, there's been a lot of sort of commentary in the news around brand India, changing, potentially, do you think India is going to sort of change its name to Bharat? Should it? What about the brand equity in the name? You've got, I mean, it's quite an interesting topic. It just
Listen,
came out of nowhere.
I know. I want to tell you, I think it's a non-issue. If you want to change the name, change the name. It's not going to change it to Timbuktu. I really don't care. I'll tell you why. In every language, the name of Paris is different. In every language, the name of Italy is different. Right? Name of Germany is different. Does it make any difference? Not really. If it makes you happy, if you think you're going to win an election based on that, go ahead, do whatever you want. It's not going to change the reality on the ground for the people who are doing business. For the young people, it's not going to change anything. It's a momentarily feel good kind of thing for a certain segment of the population. It irritates the hell out of another segment of the population, which is why it's a feel good for the first segment. Fair enough. In marketing, we understand if you are not a, the test of a great brand in marketing is, does anybody hate you? Because if somebody hates you, that means you stand for something. So yeah, this thing is also one of those things, I would not bother about it too much. I think it will take up a lot of ink and a lot of resources from those problems which we actually should be solving. But unfortunately, in every country, there is a little bit of the shoot myself in the foot mentality. Whether it's Russia, whether it's UK with the Brexit, whether it's America with Trump, it doesn't matter. We all countries suffer from this little shoot it yourself. We just hope to contain it and keep it within a box. That's also that the country can continue.
And now, Nirmalya, thank you so much for such a fascinating conversation. I mean, I really do. I suggest that the listeners have a look at Nirmalya Kumar's website. It lists a whole, sort of 9 books. I've read, recently Brand Breakout, which is about why emerging market brands in India and in China are going global based upon sort of similar patterns, what happened with Japan and South Korea. Absolutely fascinating. Ideas across across the sort of the 9 books. And also you've got another book that's coming out, Nirmalya. It's going to be on, is it Walmart? And
Yeah, so the book has gone to the publisher last week and will be out in March of next year because that's the production process. And that book is called Clash, and it's about Amazon versus Walmart, the two largest companies in the world, a disruptor versus an incumbent, and online versus offline. So, I've been thinking about it for so many years, so I finally wrote it.
and Nirmalya, you're on, for people who want to learn more about you, you have your, if you Google Nirmalya Kumar, you'll, come across your website. You're on Twitter as well as LinkedIn, and we'll put the links, on our
LinkedIn is especially where I'm more active, so LinkedIn is the best place to.
fantastic. Well, a warm thank you, Nirmalya. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in with Nirmalya. I have utmost respect for his pursuit of excellence across multiple fields, a real inspiration to so many of us. And I wanted to also just say, please stay tuned to further inspiring conversations that we're going to have on the PRCA Fuse. We are beginning to publish now twice a month, so every fortnight. So thank you again for tuning in. Please do subscribe, rate, review the podcast, and we look forward to welcoming you to another podcast very, very soon. All the best.